Hello, and welcome to the 7th episode of Mixed Media Reviews Season 4. My name is Kelsey, and today I'm going to be talking about a book. This week's book is This Vicious Grace by Emily Thiede. I think that's how you say it. I tried Googling it, and I still don't really know, so that's how I'm going to pronounce it. I had seen this book pop up a few times on the internets. I recognized the cover more than anything else, though. When I was looking for a new audiobook while some were still on my holds list, this book popped up with no wait. So I figured, what the heck, I didn't have anything else to read, so I might as well take another chance on another book I've seen pop up on Bookstagram. This is the summary of the book. 3 weddings, 3 funerals. Alessa's gift from the gods is supposed to magnify a partner's magic, not kill every suitor she touches. Now, with only weeks left until a hungry swarm of demons devours everything on our island home, Alessa is running out of time to find a partner and stop the invasion. When a powerful priest convinces the faithful that killing Alessa is the island's only hope, her own soldiers try to assassinate her. Desperate to survive, Alessa hires Dante, a cynical outcast marked as a killer, to become her personal bodyguard. But as rebellion explodes outside the gates, Dante's dark secrets may be the biggest betrayal. He holds the key to her survival and her heart, but is he the one person who can help her master her gift or destroy her once and for all? Okay, holy smokes, you guys. I am so glad that I took the chance on this book. Now, this book is part of a duology, which right off the bat, I really love. Give me a duology any day. I love standalones too, but sometimes you do want a little bit more, and a duology is the perfect commitment level. It gives us a little bit more, like a little bit more room for a bigger arc, but doesn't promise to really draw everything out. I'm tired of all these 7-book series that are happening. Heck, even trilogies can sometimes be annoying, especially when we keep getting all of these special editions with a bonus chapter in each one, and they just feel like money grabs. So please, more duologies. I don't really want to speak on the second book in this episode, mostly because I want people to read these books. Yes, I'm spoiling my own episode by saying I recommend this book now rather than waiting until the end, but these books were so freaking good. I absolutely devoured them. In fact, because the second book came out late last year, it didn't have an audiobook, and I couldn't even wait for whenever that would happen, so I ended up reading the ebook on the second book. Because I just could not wait any longer. And while I know I said that I saw this pop up on Bookstagram before, I feel like this is way better than a lot of the stuff that gets pushed on there, especially as of late, and yet it's still not really talked about that often, and I don't really know why. Maybe it's because the spice is at a minimum, though it's definitely there, and the spicier books are the ones that are, more popular at the moment. Or maybe because it's actually good writing and the ones that have gotten the most traction aren't. I don't know. But it needs to be talked about more because it actually deserves it 100%. And so if you haven't read it, please do so. So I will stick mostly to the first book. I'll mention the second book briefly at the end. But yeah, mostly I'll just talk about the first book. So let's talk about why this book and its sequel deserves so much more praise than I see it have. First up, the mythology. This is an Italian mythology with gods and demons, where you're not quite sure if this is set in an alternate world or perhaps one further into the future. And I really loved that. The Italian mythology was also super interesting. I liked the idea of the Fenestras, the Sicario, and all the other things that I only kind of sort of know how to pronounce because of that audiobook. It helped me pronounce everything in the second book when I was reading it, so I really appreciated that. But yeah, the writing was also really good. The characters felt real and distinct. The dialogue was really good. There weren't a lot of annoying tropes. Anytime there was like a miscommunication trope that might pop up, Thiede was really good about using it momentarily and didn't unnecessarily drag it out. Like, yes, there's always going to be some kind of, well, not always, but I mean, miscommunication tropes can be the worst thing ever, but sometimes, if done correctly, can be really good. And I think Thiede does a good job of introducing the miscommunication, but also being able to solve it in a quick manner, to make you not feel like you're just shouting at the characters to just talk to each other, because I hate that. So yeah, I thought she did really, really well with the writing, especially being this, like a debut novel. I thought she did fantastic. Dante is another reason why I really love the book. Dante was the best, and his speaking in Italian was also the best. It was super cute. And everything he said in Italian was, you definitely understood where Alessa was coming from. The book was also really well paced, I thought, from being introduced to Alessa and to the world, all the way to the countdown to Diverando, which is the apocalypse in this book. I liked that, once we had a countdown, every chapter had the countdown of how many days, which was really helpful in setting the tone of, feeling that impending doom coming up. And it also made me feel more connected to the timeline, if that makes sense. I know sometimes in books and in movies and TV shows, I don't know, maybe it's just a me thing, but I like to know how much time has passed. I talked about this in the Gilmore Girls episode I did, but there were so many times where I felt like I had no idea what the timeline was, like how many days had passed or what, and I always just felt very out of the loop, and it always threw me off. But I felt like having that countdown clock start was very helpful in keeping me understanding exactly how many days were passing, and it also helped, like I said, with that tone of the impending doom. I have two things I wanted to talk about that I saw were critiques that popped up about this book, but they were actually things that I really liked, which just goes to show you that a lot of this can be very subjective of what people like and what they don't like. And the first thing that I wanted to talk about was that I saw someone say that they didn't like that Thede used the title Fenestra, because people who know Italian would know it just meant window, and people would be just calling her window. I mean, I don't know Italian, but I do know the term fenestration, which means window. And so I really liked it because we learn, and I don't think this is really a major spoiler. I think it comes up pretty early on in the first book. But we learned that Alessa is a window, and that's what a fenestra is. So that name, that title, it fits because it's a literal interpretation of, what she, well, not literal, because she's not a literal, window on a house. But I mean, it's that interpretation of what she is. If you translate, the Fonte, and we see that name is true of them as well. So that this world that they live in, Italian is like an old language. It's not something that is super common to know. Dante may speak it, but even Alessa doesn't know it, and she's kind of like their divine being. And so it's not a super common language that people understand in the world, so it makes sense. Perhaps it was something that they used and it just kind of stuck, and while the old language kind of died out, that was still around. So I think it makes sense that they call her Fenestra, and I liked that early on we kind of were making that connection even before they explicitly state it, that she is a window. And so I thought that was really good storytelling, not lazy storytelling like some people may think. I also saw another critique that she objectified Dante, which, I mean, that's kind of fair. She does think about touching him a lot. But at the same time, she's completely touch-starved. She's not supposed to touch anyone but her Fonte, and she's killed the last 3 of them, so she really doesn't want to touch anybody else, and she hasn't even touched anyone for years. And the last time she did touch someone, we find out, which again, I don't think this is a humongous spoiler, but a little bit of information. But the last time she does touch somebody, when her power kicks in, she kissed a boy on the forehead, and that's when her power triggered, and I think he just gets really injured. But I mean, that's not great. And then the other 3 people that she ends up touching are those potential Fontes that she marries, and they all die. So yes, it makes sense that she wants to feel someone's touch and that she is starved for that touch. And of course, it's even more present when looking at someone that she's highly attracted to, like Dante. So yes, maybe that's true that she does objectify him quite a bit. But I think it makes sense that she would. And yes, it could be still labeled as toxic and, not very great that she does this. But again, it's understandable because she has not touched anybody for years. Of course, she's thinking about the way somebody else's skin would feel on hers, or just thinking about casual touches or anything. And of course, her being, I think she's 19 in this, young, and, she's cooped up with a very handsome fella. Of course, she's going to probably think about that even more often outside the being touch-starved. So I thought it was really well done. I think there's lots of stuff in the books that kind of also come with this idea of her being touch-starved and how she reacts to people and how that kind of makes her feel about herself and the world and the people around her. And I thought Thede did a really good job of, not discounting the fact that she genuinely hasn't really touched anybody in years. But that should be part of her story, part of her, kind of issues with the world, you could say. And I just thought it makes sense to me. But yeah, so I really loved the second book as well. I thought it had all the same things I loved about the first book. It still had a lot of great action, a lot of cute Dante moments, which of course we're all living for. It had good pacing, it had interesting mythology, and I thought the books were just really good. The second one, I think, did a great job of picking up where the first one leaves off. And it just, I don't want to give anything away, so I'm not going to tell you how I feel about the ending necessarily. But I do want to say that both books were really good, and there were plenty of things that happened in both that I did not see coming, and that is always a positive thing. I don't really have a lot of critiques for this book. I do know that when a story really hooks me in, I tend to kind of gloss over some issues the book may have. I mean, even ACOTAR, which has a ton of issues, I kind of just glossed over. I mean, I was still able to rant about it, and I still bring up all of its bad points, for sure, because that stuff really, really stood out. But I don't think that was really the case here in this duology. I mean, I'm sure if I were to really nitpick it, I could find stuff. There's always something to find. No book is perfect. But I'll just mention two things that aren't really things that I'll get to in a minute. Because it's really the only things that can come to mind are these two items. Because I think the books are really good. So like I said, I listened to the first book, but then read the second since it came out late last year and there wasn't one yet. And I know that sometimes when I'm listening to books, I might lose a bit of focus here and there because typically I'm doing a task while listening to audiobooks, whether that's me getting ready in the morning or doing the dishes or something or folding laundry. So sometimes my mind does kind of slip away. So I'm not entirely sure if it's my fault or not, but there were certainly times in the beginning of the books where I couldn't quite follow all of the mythology. Maybe it was because I was getting confused by all the different Italian names and I couldn't keep everything separate. Maybe it's because I was listening to it and I am very much more a visual person, or like I said, because sometimes my mind wanders a little bit. I don't know if that's something that could have been fixed, if it's something that was because of maybe info dumping or what, but sometimes it took a bit for me to kind of remember what name belonged to what, and to really kind of piece together the mythology. So the second thing that I wanted to mention is that while I do like both titles, This Fish's Grace and This Cursed Light, I don't know how you would say it. This Cursed Light. I think I like This Cursed Light better than This Cursed Light. Anyway, while I did like both of the titles, I don't know why, but I genuinely, I can't remember them. I constantly forget This Vicious Grace. And I I have no idea why I can't get it stuck in my head. I can very vividly picture the cover page of This Vicious Grace, but remembering the title is so difficult, and the only really reason that I'm remembering now is because it's right in front of my face. I mean, I do read a lot of books, that is true, but I typically at least remember the titles of them. I am the kind of person that tends to also forget immediately after I read a book, like everything that I've read, so that can be a problem. But I don't know why I can't remember the titles, but they're good, and I don't know if that's a me thing or if that's just the titles are just hard to remember. And I don't even think this is a critique, but it's just something I thought I'd let you know. Like I said, I highly, highly recommend this duology, and I wish it was talked about more because it really is so good. I read every single night. It's part of my bedtime routine. So while I can maybe be a bit of a mood reader when selecting my next book, I don't really get into reading slumps. But finishing each of these books made me feel like I was in a slump. Selecting the next books to read after I finished them was really rough. I genuinely was just standing there trying to figure out, okay, what should I read next? The audiobook was a little easier because the book just came off my hold, so I was able to get to the next one. But picking out the next physical book after I read the second book, I just didn't know what to do. And it took me a while to get into both the next audiobook and the next physical book, because I was just so hung up on this duology and I could not stop thinking about that book. I just couldn't stop. I still sometimes think about them. Yeah, I highly recommend reading them and checking them out because they're really good. And there you have it. Those are my thoughts on This Vicious Grace and a little bit of This Cursed Light by Emily Thiede. Thank you so much for joining me. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr at Mixed Media Reviews Podcast. Please leave me a comment to let me know if you agreed or disagreed or if you have any suggestions. You can also find me anywhere you find your podcasts, probably. Though using Spotify would be very helpful for me. Please join me next week where I'm going to be reviewing a TV show. And that is True Blood, I think. I'm almost done with it, and I think I have some stuff to say about it. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye!